Alright, in today's video we're going to be going over the ESRB rating for Final Fantasy VII Rebirth because some of the descriptions there have people speculating on specific key moments from the original game that could play out in Rebirth. And we're also going to be talking a little bit more about Zack, his role in Rebirth, and whether or not you need to know the story of Crisis Core to understand what's going on in the remake trilogy. If any of that sounds cool to you, feel free to click the like button and subscribe if you're new here and you'd like to stick around. There's a huge back catalog of content on the channel regarding Final Fantasy, Resident Evil, all kinds of good stuff if you like to check it out. And I do make the short form stuff on YouTube Shorts, as well as TikTok if that's more your speed. But getting to this ESRB rating, this comes to us directly from the ESRB website. There's some interesting things in this description here, so we're going to go line by line, take a look at it, and talk about what I think they're talking about or explaining. Starting off first, cutscenes depict further instances of violence, sometimes with splatters / pools of blood. Now, looking back at the original FF7 Remake, there's not really a lot of blood in that game. And if I remember correctly, I don't know if there is blood in the game. It's been a while since I played through it, but I do remember when the game came out, there were some content creators that were pretty upset that the scene from the original game where you find the blood trail leading to the president's office in the Shinra building was gone. That was replaced with shiny, purpley, gooey stuff from Genova, and I do know a lot of people actually got upset by that. Personally, it didn't really bother me. The blood trail in the original game was fine, but Genova is a space creature, so it makes sense for her to have this weird, gooey, shiny, glowy kind of blood. But also, I think they changed that because they wanted to try and keep that T rating, because if you bump the game up to M, it can make it harder to sell in specific areas. But to see that they are going to have blood in this game, I'm very curious to see what parts will in fact have the bloody pools of blood stuff. I think I know which scenes in particular, and we'll get to a little bit more of that later. Secondly, characters impaled or slashed by swords, sometimes with slow motion effects. Now obviously, big spoiler warning here for the people that didn't play the original FF7, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, you've been warned. Everyone thinks that this is talking about Aerith in the moment that she dies and gets impaled by Sephiroth's sword. Again, we don't know what her fate's going to be in Rebirth. She could survive, so this could just be a red herring that's throwing people off. But you have to keep in mind, in the Nibelheim flashback, Cloud gets impaled by Sephiroth's sword. And if I remember correctly, he stabs Sephiroth with the Buster Sword too, although I might be wrong on that. And then in the trailer, I believe it was the Summer Game Fest trailer, we see Tifa get slashed by Sephiroth's sword in slow motion. So those are the moments I think they're actually talking about, and I don't know for sure if Aerith is going to die. So I think these descriptions here are referring to the stuff we're going to see in the Nibelheim flashback. And of course, there could be new scenarios in the game where somebody gets stabbed by a specific sword. I do remember the Midgar Zalem being impaled not by a sword, but by a tree trunk by Sephiroth, so we could see a different variation of that playing out in Rebirth as well. Up next, an assassin throwing a spinning blade at a targeted figure, and characters shot by soldiers. That could be in reference to Yuffie throwing her weapon at a specific enemy, maybe in a cutscene. It could be somebody else, even from Wutai, that shows up maybe to assassinate specific characters. Maybe there's an attempt on Rufus being made by Wutai, we don't know. But that next part, characters shot by soldiers. I think, again, this could be a spoiler for some people who didn't play Crisis Core, I think that's in reference to Zack. I fully believe that they're going to show us the events of Crisis Core and what happens to Zack in the old timeline where he dies and he's gunned down essentially by all of these Shinra soldiers while he's protecting Cloud. And that's also where the pools of blood can come into play, because he lies on the ground and he bleeds out and he dies. So it's a pretty graphic shot, but I'm pretty sure they will show scene by scene in Rebirth the events of Crisis Core and how Zack got to where he is now. Next, some female characters are designed with revealing outfits, e.g. deep cleavage. Nice. Suggestive dialogue sometimes accompanies camera panning close-ups of characters' bodies in their outfits. That is most likely Costa del Sol stuff. People are going to be wearing bikinis out on the beach. There's also the gold saucer area where we're going to see Andrea again, so there could be people dressed more scantily clad in that specific area during his shows, or maybe people who are attending the events themselves. And this next part here, I have a lot of ideas on this. Just admit it, you're obviously captivated by my bodacious beach bod, is a line that is uttered in the game. We'll come back to that one in a second. The game contains some alcohol content, as Cloud players can drink a version of moonshine while at a bar. Cutscenes sometimes feature drunk characters slurring their speech. A handful of scenes depict characters smoking cigars or out of hookahs, and swear words are appearing in the game. Now going back to that line, just admit it, you're obviously captivated by my bodacious bod. There's a number of people that could say that. Johnny could show up, he could be in front of Tifa trying to impress her, he could say it. In some weird alternate universe, Hojo maybe says it. There could be random NPCs that maybe hit on our characters, like Tifa and Aerith, maybe Yuffie, that are trying to get their attention. My brain and my heart wants this so badly to be Aerith. Imagine a scene where the entire crew drinks this version of moonshine. Aerith, who's maybe never had alcohol before, cannot hold her weight in liquor, maybe gets a little drunk, starts to slur her speech, flirts with some people, and maybe utters that line, just admit it. You're obviously captivated by my bodacious beach bod in that very fun, playful way that we know Aerith is capable of. So I wholeheartedly hope that it is Aerith that says this line, but it could be anybody. Yuffie could jokingly say it as well. Zack could even say a line like that. He's very silly and goofy like that, but my heart wants it so badly to be drunk Aerith. Please, Square, let it be drunk Aerith. And then, of course, the last line there where they talk about smoking and swearing, my mind immediately goes to Cid. Now, obviously, characters like Barret and Cloud did swear in Remake. It wasn't a lot, but every once in a while they would let it out. But a character like Cid, he's got a mouth that would make a sailor blush, constantly swearing left and right. Now, I do think that Cid probably won't swear as much in Rebirth, obviously because they want to keep the T rating and maybe tone it down just a little bit. And that's honestly not something I'm super worried about because the writing and the localization in the Remake trilogy so far has been so good that I think they can find creative ways to have Cid explain his displeasure that don't rely on swearing all the time. And if you do pull back on the swearing, it makes it more impactful when somebody does swear. I think back to 7 Remake when you're fighting the Arbiter of Fate and the 3 Whisperers in front of you, and Cloud just straight up runs up to one of them and says, "Bring it on, bitch." And it's like, holy crap, like, okay, Cloud is serious, this is a real fight. So when you pull back on the swearing, when you do eventually hear it, I think it has a little bit more impact to it. Now, moving on to the Zack talk, this article comes to us from Hobby Consolas, which is a Spanish website, and if I read the blurb correctly, they were one of the few, if not only, publications in Spain that got to speak to Naoki Hmaguchi and Yoshinori Kitase to ask them these questions, which is pretty massive for them. But they go on to ask Hamaguchi, is it necessary for people to play Crisis Core to understand Zack or what's going to happen in Rebirth? Hamaguchi responds by saying, if you want to empathize more with Zack's character, feel and understand him better, then it is a good idea to have played Crisis Core before this game. You might get a different perspective on it. But the way he appears in this game and the story behind him is not directly related to what happens to him in Crisis Core. So to understand and follow the story, you don't need to have played Crisis Core at all. But then again, if people are interested in Zack, it might even be a good idea to play Crisis Core after Rebirth to learn more about the characters. In fact, Zack plays a very important role in Rebirth by helping to tell the story in its entirety. In Remake, we had these entities called echoes that were used to show doubts about how the story was going to continue and play with people's expectations. I think he's talking about the Whispers, so this might be a translation thing. What is going to happen? How is it going to end? Is it going to be different? What do I expect? At the end of the game, when they break through the barriers of destiny, suddenly anything was possible, and people didn't know what was going to happen from that point on. The Echoes are very involved in all of this, and Zack takes on a very similar role in Rebirth. Through Zack, you will discover more about what happened after you broke through the restrictions of fate and escaped that timeline. You are going to discover what could really be happening and how it could all end. He plays a very important role in all of that. And honestly, Hamaguchi basically took the words right out of my mouth and took most of my video with it. But he does hit the nail on the head there. I don't think you need to play Crisis Core to understand who Zack is or what's going to happen in Rebirth, because I'm pretty sure they will give us a refresher in Rebirth on who Zack is, what he's been through, what his original fate has been, and now that he's alive, how he's going to affect the story going forward. But for those of us who have played Crisis Core, getting a second chance with Zack, getting him back, is going to be so much more impactful in regards to what he does, how he does things, and how he moves the story forward. Because we know him, we know what he's been through, we know his struggles, we've seen him, spoiler alert, die, which was a very sad moment in Crisis Core and the OG FF7. But there are a lot of people who are new to FF7 and they're jumping into this franchise with Remake, so they don't know who Zack is. And based on that, I would actually urge people people not to play Crisis Core because it does give away so much information on who Zack is and what his fate is. And I think if you don't know any of that and you go into Rebirth and then you find out who he is and what he's been through, that might hit people a little bit harder and make things much more emotional and impactful. And in regard to those echoes, or what I think are the whispers, that's basically Zack now. He's now alive when he shouldn't be. He's going to see certain things and affect the timeline in a way where it wasn't affected before. And that's going to completely create a new branch that's going to run parallel to what Cloud and his party are doing. And I think what Zack does in his timeline is going to be vital to what Cloud and his crew are doing in their timeline. And they're going to be probably certain abilities or pieces of information that Zack has that Cloud just won't get, and vice versa. So they're gonna have to eventually pool their resources together and figure out what Sephiroth is doing and how they're gonna stop him. And also, this is kind of in reference to Crisis Core, but if you look back at Crisis Core, there are so many characters in that game that talk like weird anime robots, and it's just confusing and they don't make any sense, and it feels like nobody knows how to have a real conversation except for Zack and a few other characters. But there are moments in that game where Genesis or Angeal will say something and Zack will respond basically like, "What are you saying? What is your problem? What are you talking about? What's going on?" He's very much kind of like a vehicle for the audience. That's who Zack is. He's the audience and he's interpreting all these things for us, and we're kind of like the fish out of water in that scenario. And when something weird happens, Zack points it out, just like we would point it out. So I think it'll be similar in Rebirth, because Zack now being alive, he's gonna witness some weird stuff that nobody can explain. But with that being said, that is the video. I am Curious Corduroy. Let me know in the comments down below, what do you guys think of the ESRB rating for Rebirth? Who do you hope says that line about the bodacious beach bod? What do you think the scenario is going to be? And what do you think Zack's going to be doing in Rebirth? Do you think that they will go full bore and show everything that happened in Crisis Core and explain it to the audience? I will see you guys in the next video. Please remember to always be excellent to one another.